Hey folks, welcome back to DCS.
Alignment's done, go primary sync now. We're ready to taxi.
So today we're going to be doing a VR sortie in the Phantom on Heatblur's Dynamic Cold War server.
Let's go kick some ass.
And I'm just going to be talking you through not only what we're doing and how I'm approaching it differently because I'm in VR, but also like my general impressions on VR overall. Had this headset for a little over a month now, I think, maybe getting on for 2. And it was a bumpy road to get this far. The hardest part was probably getting the footage to actually look good enough to actually showcase on YouTube in the first place, because the screen mirror is basically what is on my monitor whilst I'm wearing the headset. So it isn't as I see it. It actually looks a lot better than this in the headset. There's like a crisp edge on everything. It basically looks like how I would see it if I was playing on, you know, flat screen like my usual monitor without VR. For whatever reason, the screen mirror doesn't look as crisp as the screen would if it weren't a mirror of my VR headset, even though the headset's resolution is double what my monitor's resolution is, and then some.
Shit, you're too fast.
It just looks worse on my monitor when it's displayed there for some reason. I'm not sure why that is, but hopefully it's good enough that you can still sit through this this thing. So the first thing is, during the startup, it's quite odd having to actually like look directly downwards into my side to be able to click on switches and buttons that are like down by your thighs. But obviously in track IR everything's always in front of you, because that's where your monitor is. So the sensation of being surrounded by the plane is VR's biggest strength in my opinion, and it's actually pretty cool. However, it's not without its drawbacks. The biggest one is finding shit that you've bound to your keyboard because you can't see your keyboard. So in a second I'm going to be ditching my tanks, and I have to flick a switch after I've ditched them to tell the plane to feed from the internal fuel again. It's not essential, but it feels like it makes the fuel last longer. And finding the button for that was an absolute nightmare. So we're going to merge with, I think it's a MiG-15. Maybe a MiG-21 before that, so we'll get to it in a second. So I'm struggling to find this contact. I finally spot him, and he whips by. It's a bright red MiG-15. Already I'm struggling to maintain visual. I really can't twist as far in real life as I can using head tracking. So for me, the biggest disconnect in the dogfighting is being able to maintain visual. And thankfully it's a MiG-15, not something that's fast, so when I lose viz, which is inevitable, I just extend away before turning back in once I've got a bit of separation, and thankfully I'm so much faster than the MiG-15, it's very easy to build up some separation. So we turn it back in, MiG-21s are somewhere near me. I think that might well be him. So we're going to ignore, in fact that's a Phantom, we're going to ignore the MiG-15s for now because they're not going to be able to catch up to me if I'm flying straight. And I'm looking for the 21, so I follow the Phantom thinking that either he'll be able to see the 21 or maybe the 21 will be chasing him. So if I keep eyes on one half of the fight, hopefully I should find the other half. But this guy is absolutely oblivious. He may have killed the 21 and I missed it. So I'm just waiting for the next report. So I just ditched my external tanks. And now I've bound the switch to the A key on my keyboard, and I'm trying to find it in order to press it. And the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 keys are what I've bound my weapon select, station select keys to. I must have accidentally caught the gesture menu as well, so I was catching the station select, trying to find the fuel switch. MiG-15 gets on R6 in the meantime. It's really, really hard to aim the MiG-15 at aircraft that aren't turning. So I just fly in a dead straight line, wiggle a little bit every once in a while because the MiG-15's roll rate is really bad, and then just punch the burn as an extend, and I'll very, very quickly open up a gap and get away from him. Obviously he doesn't have missiles, so after we've got like 2-3 miles between us, we turn back around. And we start looking for him again. So I can actually see things in the recording much more easily than I could through the headset. I can see that guy. I did see that guy at the time as well, I think, so we're turning it on that guy. Something else just buzzed right across our nose. We're going to ignore that in favour of the thing that I can't actually see. So here I'm trying to get a Sparrow lined up, but the aspect feels off. I thought he was away from me, so I switched to Sidewinders, but then he's actually head on. So we go for guns. One thing I really like about VR is that it's much easier to put your head exactly where you want it in relation to the gun sight, so you really do get a sense of where the plane's going even when you're not looking forwards. And it makes lining up deflection shots, at least getting the alignment right, actually quite satisfying and easier in my opinion than using track AR. But the downside is that because you're within the plane now rather than looking at it from afar through a window like when you're using a monitor, it's actually really difficult to judge lead. Did actually get a hit on his wing there, but it's harder to judge lead because everything feels further away, which I know makes no sense because your monitor is like looking through a window and then it physically is further away. But when you're inside the plane, the world at large feels gigantic, and that makes your sense of scale much bigger on the whole, and it makes stuff feel bigger further away, it makes distances feel greater, it makes speed feel faster. It's hard to put into words if you haven't had a chance to experience it firsthand, but for me that's where the strength of VR really is. Where it loses out for me, it's so hard to maintain visual through these manoeuvres, and that guy is bright red. It should be effortless to keep eyes on him, but it just isn't, and the resolution, although it's extremely high, because it has to overlap two images in order to give you that 3D depth perception, binocular vision vibe, you know, like the entire purpose of VR. It's very difficult to get the alignment of both images to be exactly correct, and if it is exactly correct for one distance, it won't be exactly correct for another. So you always get a lack of clarity, a reduced clarity at certain distances, just by way of how VR works, and that tends to be the biggest downside for me, because you lose graphical fidelity at ranges. I can't generally identify a target visually until I'm within like Fox 2 range, whereas with track AR I'll be able to see the aircraft from about maybe 10 miles away and see it well enough to actually identify what it is from looking at it, and you just can't do that in VR. At least I can't. It might be the fact that I've not found the right settings for it yet. I'm sure there's plenty of tweaking I could do on top of what I've already done to make it better than it is, but that's the struggle for me. Both identifying a target, seeing it well enough to follow it through stuff, twisting my head enough to track it properly, and then things like missile launches, especially if it's a smokeless missile like an AIM-9M, I just cannot see well enough or in high enough definition because of the overlapping images, because of the blur, to know when I'm being shot at. So if you don't have a wingman to help you find things you lose as they pass behind you and to call out launches and stuff, I really do feel it a really big disadvantage.
7 o'clock now.
The other thing with this headset in particular is that it does have built-in audio and built-in microphone, but the clarity of the microphone is absolutely abysmal. If it weren't for the fact that my head tracking and my track AR is permanently affixed to my headset, I probably would be able to wear my headset underneath the VR headset and use my own speakers and my usual microphone. But I can't because of track ARs, and I would have filmed this live through the headset, but you can't hear me because the microphone is so bad.
7 o'clock
So
now.
that's a big negative against it in my opinion. The other thing as well is that I don't think that VR footage is as good on YouTube, even if this looked as crisp as it does on 2D. I feel like the head movements are a bit more janky, they're not as smooth, and the zoom is a bit more jarring because it all happens at once rather than it being a fluid in and out. And then the other thing is that you're only seeing what I see through one eye, not both. So everything's slightly off to the right, rather than like centered and seeing exactly what I would see. Things like opening the map as well is quite jarring in VR because it literally teleports you into a room with a map in it rather than like it just being the whole image like it is in 2D. VR's strength for me is the immersion by a long way, the depth, the scope of the world, like the vastness of everything, the size, the speed, the sensations. It makes things like aerial refueling and landing, although I do fuck this landing up, but I think that's part of what I was saying earlier about judging the distance because everything feels nearer.
Okay, gear, flap,
But with practice I can tell that I would be a lot better at like actually manoeuvring the plane in an accurate manner than I am in 2D, but I feel at a huge disadvantage in fights in VR because of all of the other stuff that I listed. With practice I'm sure it's fine, but for me it's a huge adjustment, and I don't think I'd have enough time to ever feel like I'm as good in VR as I am in Track AR, mainly just because looking behind me is so much more of a chore. Personally, I can't see VR being something that I switch to full time, but now that I'm getting to the point where I'm tweaking the settings and it's actually playable, I do feel an itch to keep playing in VR because there is something to it that you just don't have in 2D. I'm just trying to balance the satisfaction of actually doing well and the footage being more watchable with VR offering that bit more that you don't get in flat screen. I hope you enjoyed the video, folks. Thanks a lot for watching. Leave a like if you liked it. Subscribe if you want to see more. I will be putting a VR review up. I'm hoping to get some like better clarity footage than this and stockpile some clips and just get more experience in it in general before I give my final thoughts. So if you want to hear that overall, then be sure to stick around. If I haven't already mentioned, it's a Pimax Crystal Light headset. I'll have to annotate that at the beginning. Should have really mentioned it at the start, but crap. Anyway, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.